Hello, everybody. I'm Darshan, and I live in Ananda Sisi. And this is again another episode of a series of interviews with Ananda's pioneers. And today we are very happy, grateful, and honored that we can now speak with Nayaswami Savitri. So, welcome and thank you for being with us today. The audience of this interview will not just be European, even though it will be posted on the European Ananda Sangha website, but obviously internet is omnipresent and people will be able to see it all over the world. So I would like to start with, very shortly, with a question, like a funny question. Is it true that you knew Elvis Presley when you were a little girl?
I lived not far from where he lived in the early days of his career. So my best friend and I we were about 11 or 12 years old, and we would get on our bicycles and ride over to his home, which was not Graceland. That came later. This was just a little suburban home.
In
And
which city, Savitri? Where?
Memphis, Tennessee. Yeah, that's where I lived, and that's where he grew up too. He was originally from Tupelo, Mississippi, but that's not far south, not too far south from Memphis. And his family moved there when he was, I think, in high school or junior high, something like that. Anyway, he was older than me, I should say that, by some years. So my girlfriend and I would ride our bicycles over to his house when he was first kind of getting famous locally, not so much more. And he had bought a little home for his mother and father, and he had bought a pink Cadillac, and he kept it parked out in front of his house. So we would ride over there at a certain time in the afternoon. We knew he would come out and take his mother for a ride in the pink Cadillac. So we were just little girls, 11, 12 years old, and we would wave at him and he would wave at us, and then get in his car and go. So that's my entire claim to fame as far as Elvis is concerned. I didn't really know him, no.
No, but I've always found it a charming story. Yeah. He was interested later in his life. I think he was interested in spirituality and in Yogananda.
Oh, yeah. There's books about that. He read the autobiography of a yogi, and he contacted Dayamata. He went to Mount Washington many times, and was very, very, very interested in these teachings.
But maybe a little bit engaged in his fame, so he couldn't really.
Well, I think his problem, knowing how he grew up, similar to how I grew up, was bad company. I mean, he didn't have good people around him. The people that were around him were not very nice people, and certainly not interested in anything spiritual.
Deeper, yeah. Okay, well, you are interested in spiritual things. That's what you have dedicated your life to. And you are, amongst many other things, you're a teacher, or you have served as a teacher, and you have served, and you are maybe still serving as a writer. Okay, and I have 3 books of yours here. This one, Through Many Lives, A Tale of Time Travel Through the Yugas, and Through the Chakras, which is a tale of adventure in the 7 pyramids. Yeah, you have them too. And here I have your latest, I think this is your latest novel, right? Through the Gates of Death.
Through the Gates of Death and Beyond.
Yeah. So is this your latest novel?
This is my latest novel, and it's the third in a trilogy, so I'm done with that trilogy. But I'll show you my other books too. You want to see my other books?
Of course I want to see them.
The first one I ever put together is the Chakras workball. This has always been my bestseller.
This goes around all over the Ananda world, you know that.
And I just print it and sell it myself, but I use it for all the classes that I give. And then I have Chakras for Starters, Okay.
That also, I've seen it many times, even though I'm in Europe and you're in America.
Now, this is the one book I wrote that Swami said he really liked.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I don't doubt you like it, because the way I wrote it was transcribing all of his talks on the chakras and then honing it down a little bit. And then this is The Meaning of Dreaming.
Yeah, I've got that one. It was given to me by a common friend.
Yeah, there's an Italian version, because I have some friends in Italy that tell me they see it all over the place in Italy.
Oh.
And like bus station book racks and things. But that was pretty good. Yeah. So
yeah, but you should know about that.
Well, I mean, I hope somebody knows about it. Yeah, but it's in Italian and it has a different cover. And
well, I have the original version, and it was given to me by a common friend, by Jan Shapiro.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. So I would like to talk especially about your latest novel,
Okay.
about Through the Gates of Death and Beyond, Adventures in the Locus of Immortality. So you have in the same title, you have death, you have beyond death, and you have the word immortality.
Yeah.
And so the first thing, so this is a little bit like a rough start. I wanted to ask you, this book gives us a lot of knowledge about death and about dying and about the after states and so on. So it is, did you feel while you were writing it that your readers were going to be people who already had a certain amount of knowledge, or would you say this book is for everyone?
Well, let me back up just a little bit and say why I wrote it, because a little history would help answer that question, I think. So it was back in about 2007 or so, Swami, out of the blue, had his secretary call me to come over to his house. And I had never had that happen before. He asked me to come over to tea by myself. So I went over in great trepidation. I thought he was going to send me to India or something. But he had me for tea and we talked a little bit. And then he said, I enjoy your writing, because I'd written, a couple of things. And he said, have you ever considered writing a spiritual novel? And I said, well, I actually had thought about it, but a novel is very different from nonfiction, and it'd be harder, I'm sure. And so he said, well, I'd like for you to think about it and see if you can give me a plot, something that would be interesting for people, where you could weave our teachings into a good story, make a good story, but put our teachings in it. He said, I think some people would be more likely to read a novel than they would a nonfiction book, but then they could get the teachings. And he himself had not yet at that time written a novel. As you know, later he wrote novels, 3 of them, I think, or so. Anyway, so I said, well, if you'll help me, I'll try. So I wrote the first one, and he read it while he was still alive. And the truth is, he didn't really like it that much.
Is it this one?
I thought it was a great book, but he didn't care for it that much.
Is it this one?
Yeah, Through Many Lives, about the yugas and reincarnation and all that. And, he told me the things he thought I could have done better. And then he went and wrote one himself, a time travel book called The Time Tunnel. So I often laughingly tell people I'm responsible for that book, because he wanted something more of what he had in mind for a time travel book. So I was a little dismayed, and I decided, well, I tried and I didn't do it. So I just let it go. I don't need to write another novel. I did my best, and that's Swami thought, man, not so great. So, okay, I'm not cut out to be a novel writer. But after he passed away, the oddest thing happened to me. I began to get very strong messages from God and from him. You need to write another one, another novel. And I just ignored it. I didn't want to do it, but I couldn't ignore it. So finally I said, okay. And I started the second one, which was very easy for me to write. That's Through the Chakras, because I've taught so many classes on the chakras. And it was just, I took a whole year out. The other thing I wanted to do, and the reason I figured the first book may not have been up to snuff, and Swami's, of course, Swami's the greatest writer in the world as far as I'm concerned. So no wonder I couldn't do as well as he. But, and he told me that very sweetly. He said, Savitri, the truth is, I don't like anybody's books of my own. I know he was not. He didn't mean that, but he was trying to make me not feel bad, you know. And I do appreciate that. But the other thing I said, if I write another book, I'm going to take off time because I wrote the first one, you know, in between at night or weekends or, you know, when I had time off, and it was fractured. So I said, if I write anything else, I'm going to take time off, not work, and just do nothing but write.
That
So
must have been difficult. I mean,
well,
it must have been required a lot of determination because you do so many other things. I know
yeah,
that.
that was in 2015. I took a year sabbatical. I quit working for a whole year. And I worked on that novel. And not only that, I left home and went and lived down on the Yuba River out in a tent, you know, and I was all alone and nobody to bother me. I had a computer, it worked, and
Did
I
your
had
husband bring you some food every now and then?
brought me supplies. He did. He was my supply person. But I just did nothing but focus on that book, and it was so much fun. And I wrote it in 3 months. The first one took me 3 years, and the second one took me 3 months. So then I understood, you know, more of how to write a novel. Plus, I felt Swami really blessing me to do that. And so then I finished that. I said, oh, yeah, I did it. You know, it's good. I feel Swami's smile in my heart, even though he's not still in the body. And so then I thought, well, I'm done. That's good. I did what, you know, I did what he asked me to do and so forth.
And you had 9 more months, so it took you 3
No,
months to
no,
write.
it took me the whole year, really, because not only you have to write it, you have to have it edited, you have to, I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff to do.
Yeah.
So that was done. And then, you know, it's probably about a year went by, and I started getting this message again, you're not done. You have to write another novel. I said, what? Why? You know, but then I realized that, you know, of course, a trilogy is 3 books, plus the characters in the first book are the same as the characters in the second book, except older. In the third book, I thought, well, I can make them be older, but then what? And then I thought, I could kill them. I can make them die. And then we could explore the astral world. What fun that would be.
Yeah.
So that's what I had in mind. And I was back to work again, but I was only working half time. So I would work in the morning and work on the book in the afternoons. And so that's how the third one came to be written. And I was thrilled with it. But I had to do a lot more research for the third one, because I wasn't really sure everything that Master and Swami had said about what it's like to die and go into the astral world, and what the astral world is like, and how it's different from the causal world, and how all of that is different from final liberation. And, you know, I just wanted to be really sure that I got that right, because it's a very important subject. And it's important for me because I'm getting towards the close of my life also. And so anyway, that's a little background on it. And I really did stick absolutely closely to everything Swami and Master had said. I just wove it around a story. So that's.
Thank you. So it took a little courage also for you to maintain the title. That's what I understand from your introduction, where people had said to you, if you have the word death in your book, people won't buy it.
That's right.
You didn't listen to them.
Don't put death in the title. Nobody will buy it unless it's a murder mystery. If it's a murder mystery,
exactly. Yeah, the death of Daniel Aykroyd or something.
Oh, it's too much of a bummer. People don't want to talk about death. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to talk about it, which is too bad, because it's the one sure thing pretty much for everybody. But anyway,
so you say so be it, and you decided to keep the title.
Yes.
Has it had any influence on the spreading of the book, the buying, do you know?
I don't know. Right now, everything is, you know,
At a stop.
I sell most of my books through the Ananda boutiques and in Crystal Clarity, and everything has had to go into slow motion right now because of the virus. So it was selling well until this hit, and I'm happy. You know, I'm really not attached. I wrote it because I felt God wanted me to, and I do my best to promote it, but that's not my first
Goal.
desire.
Yeah. So at a certain point, again, in your introduction, you say something like knowledge is power. In other words, it's
Yes.
important. That was, by the way, an old slogan of the left in the Netherlands when I was young.
Yeah.
Like it was the left party, the socialist party, knowledge is power, so everybody has a right to higher education, etc. But in this case, this is also higher education, but of a different type.
Yes.
And actually much more practical, because knowledge in this case means knowledge about death, dying, and after state,
Yeah.
and so on.
And
So
I know that so many people are really truly frightened of death, or
yeah,
they have someone near them who dies and they just don't know how to put it
yeah,
together. They're
yeah.
in grief. And I thought, well, this book could conceivably really help some people. And fortunately, since I wrote it, I have received some wonderful letters, information from people who have had people pass away and who were in deep grief and didn't understand why they were so sad and what they could do and all this. That said that this book really helped them. Helped
Well,
them
that's
out a lot.
wonderful. That's
So
wonderful.
yeah,
Mhm.
if only one person I helped in that way, I would be worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's think now. So we're going to go back to the book, but let's think now of people. So the world has gone through a difficult period. Many people, I think hundreds of thousands of people have died from this COVID-19 virus. And well, they had to go through what they had to go through, I suppose. It's not a, but
It
then of
just
course, the people who are left, it was not an easy way of losing someone. It's not like he died because he had lived his life, or it was still quite a sudden thing. Now, if you had to say something to those people, apart from say read my book, which would be the best thing to say, no, obviously, but
obviously.
yeah, but the other thing, if we were more conversational, so what would you say to the hundreds of people who are left behind right now, and who have only, they may not have that level of faith and knowledge, and they may actually still be in grief. Is
Yes.
there anything that you could say apart from read my book, which is, like I
Yeah.
said, is without joking, that would be the best thing to do? Yeah.
Well, yes, I think you have to be very sensitive to people who are grieving. It's not, you can't just say, hey, they're in the astral world, they're in a better place, get over it, don't be attached. You can't say that kind of thing, because it doesn't really help. What you can say is, I understand, and everyone goes through grief. Everyone dies. Everyone goes through grief. It's not an unusual emotion to have. Most people, I mean, I don't know anyone gets through life without having to go through some of that kind of thing. Even the great masters, like Yogananda, I mean, Swami was in grief. I remember when his mother died, he cried. He loved her so much. And yet, I know he was beyond that in many ways. But you see, they live their lives the higher ones live their lives on both a
On the
superficial
levels. Yeah.
and a human level. Because if they weren't human, then we couldn't relate to
No,
them.
no.
But the thing there's a whole chapter in the Through the Gates of Death on grief, and the main character asks the question, how can I help someone who's grieving? And what can I do for someone who's grieving, which I think might be what your question really is.
Mhm.
And so I just present everything that Swami and Master really say about this, um, that it's going to take time for most normal you and me human being types. It's going to take some time, but during that time, it is not helpful for the person who's passed away for you to be overly grieving. Now, a little grieving you can't help, but to weep and wail and cry and say, my life is over, I'll never be the same, and this is horrible. And if nothing else, you can try to be unselfish yourself and say, I don't want to hold this person back. They're not dead. They're in the astral world and they've got things to do there. But if I'm going through all of this and they love me and I love them, it will not harm them irrevocably, but it will keep them from doing the things they need to do right now. So be unselfish about this. Send them lots of light, lots of love, lots of prayer. Let them know you love them. You know that they love you. But it's time for them to do something else now. And if you're a dharmic person, if you want to do the right thing, then let them go as best you can. Whenever you feel those cords of attachment binding you, they come out of your heart, then sit in meditation and try to snip them off and let them go, and they'll come back. But eventually it will fade away, as all things do, unless you feed it and feed it. You may have known people that just never get out of grief. They get into it and it's like 50 years later they're still grieving over something, and that's because they don't know how destructive it is both to themselves and to the one they're grieving for. And people don't want to hurt this person that's left their body. I mean, I don't think they do. And you always think about that time where some of the SRF nuns were there at Master's crypt, and they were crying. He had just died, and they were there, and they were crying. And one of them heard Master's voice saying, "I'm not in there," pointing at the crypt. "I'm not in there. What are you crying about?" And I think it was Durga Mata who said, "Well, we're just selfish. We want you back." And he said, "Leave it to Durga to tell the truth." She told the truth. We're just selfish. So thinking through all of those things as rationally as you can, and then of course asking for help from God and Guru. I can't do this. I'm grieving. I need your help. That always works. I mean, it always helps out to do that. It is an attachment. And as yogis, as meditators, we are trying to rid ourselves of all attachments. But I've found it has to be gradual. I can rid myself of some, and others, boy, they're hanging. Those cords are not cords, they're cables. Yeah. They're made out of steel, and they're not going to go away right away without help and time and all of those things. So that's pretty much what I say in the book about how to deal with grief.
Thank you. There is also between the characters in the book, however, who suffer separation through death, they know that they will meet again.
Yes, without question.
Without question. So there's some consolation there as well.
Yes.
I mean, Thomas and Sabella, they meet again. First, in the book, you see them come together again in the astral world. But so, yeah, maybe that is hard to imagine. Or more, these people also live in a higher age,
It's true. They live in Treta Yuga, which is quite a ways in the future for us, or the past. There's been Treta Yugas on either side of us. But that was an interesting thing Swami said to me, because the first novel was in Treta Yuga too. And he said, "I don't think you quite understand how people think or act or are in Treta Yuga." And I said, "Yeah, you're right, Swami. I don't understand because I'm in Dwapara Yuga." And he just laughed. He said, "Yeah, well, I see your problem." But yeah, they are much more advanced spiritually. I mean, they can travel through time and space. And so, I just did my best to project my consciousness into a higher age. I don't know if I succeeded or not. I did my best, but that's an interesting concept to think about, trying to write far out of your own experience, at least in this particular lifetime. We have everything that Master says. And of course, that whole chapter in the autobiography of a yogi called The Resurrection of Sri Yukteswar, I mean, that's what I really based the whole book on. And it's fabulous. Yeah. It's just beyond fabulous.
Yeah. And, something you want to read over and over again at different times.
I call that chapter the sure cure for the blues. Yeah. If you have the blues, just pick up the autobiography of a yogi and read The Resurrection of Sri Yukteswar, and you can't be unhappy anymore, because it's enormously expansive in other worlds and other universes and other, it's
Yeah, it's sort of funny how you describe people in Treta Yuga, how they communicate. Because in a normal novel, it says, Sabella said, or Delina said, and here it's Sabella thought. And then you know that she's thinking it, and through her, and that through mind,
Yeah.
mental telepathy, they connect with each other and they talk to each other. I
In
found
the
that funny.
in the first book, they were young and they were students, and their teacher, they would always blurt out something, and he'd say, "No, no, don't speak. Think it, think it."
Mm-hmm.
And they
They
were,
have to learn it. Yeah.
yeah.
It's interesting. So you live at Ananda village, of course, and you've lived there for most of your life. And can you share anything about how the general feeling was in the community when Swami passed away?
It was very difficult, of course. I mean, he was in Italy, and many people just hopped on a plane and went on over there. I remember Jyotish and Devi left at that point, of course, immediately to be in Assisi. And I was their main administrative assistant at that point. And I, given my own brothers, I would have gotten right on the plane with them, but somebody had to stay here. And because there was a lot to deal with, and they would call me back and forth, and there were things to do, and people to be notified, and press releases, and just on and on, just a whole lot. So personally, I was grieving, but I was very busy also trying to just do all the things that needed to be done. And yeah, it was shocking, although I think all of us knew the day was coming. And yeah, I think it was a great shock. It happened for us at like 11 o'clock at night, and Jyotish called me and told me, and he said, get on the phone and call everybody in the community in the middle of the night.
You were
And,
the one who had to give that message?
well, I knew I couldn't do it myself, so I very quickly roped in Sudarshan to help me. And I said, I made a list. I said, I got 10 people, tell them to take this section of the phone list and call everybody. Of course, many people didn't pick up the phone because it was 2 o'clock in the morning by then. But we did get the word out very, very quickly. And we also, it was Saturday night, early Sunday morning, and we said, be sure to be at Sunday service because we will have a ceremony. Not the big ceremony, but at least we'll have an astral ascension ceremony for Swami with Jyotish and Devi. So that would be as quickly as possible after his passing, that we could all be together and sort of process what had happened. And that Sunday service was really amazing. I mean, Jyotish and Devi were kind of frantically packing and trying to get on a plane to get over, but yet they did the Sunday service that morning, and it was packed and overflowing with people, and everybody was crying.
In the expanding lights at that
Yeah,
time?
the new temple hadn't been built, of course. Yeah, it was in the expanding light temple, and yeah, I remember people just weeping and being very sad. I felt sad too, but I also felt uplifted. I felt just great joy that Swami was now moksha. I mean, he was free.
Mm-hmm.
And
could you feel that? You could feel that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, personally, but I know that many did. And I also kept thinking about that body that he was having to deal with, and that was so unwell in the last part of his life, and how wonderful it must be to be free of that physically unwell body. And well, anyway, everybody pretty much knows the story of his passing.
Yeah. So then time goes by, 7 years have passed, and you have actually written in your book about Sabella and her great-granddaughter visiting the Moksha Mandir, where the body lies.
Yes.
And meeting Swami there. And then later he comes to the concert, after the concert of the angels, and he describes how he composed the chant of the angels or the mantra of the angels.
Yeah. That's
So,
all of that is a direct quote from Swami. I took
yeah,
that right out of what he had
yeah,
written.
yeah. Well, that is, but then the one before where you meet him or you
Oh,
feel his, that
well, yeah,
isn't, right? Yeah.
that,
That
I
was,
made that up, of course.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Although I meditate a lot at the Moksha Mandir, and I feel his presence is strongly, strongly there.
Hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised if he sat right behind me and
Hmm.
said something to me
Hmm.
someday.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you feel that like what Devi says, I think she said it not so long ago, that since he has left that body, he's actually even more present for many people.
I agree.
How do you see that work out? How do you see that manifest?
I think that if you're smart enough to contact Swami just simply by saying, Swami, what do you think about this? Or can you help me with this? Or, um, just tune into his presence and as though he were there. I've talked to a number of people that have just said it's just he's so present. He's not really gone. If you take the time and energy to tune into him through your meditations and so forth, and I've certainly found that to be true. I mean, it's not like there's this ghost that shows up and
No,
that kind
no,
of thing.
no.
It's more of a living inner feeling, a presence, and
Yeah.
then answers to questions
Hmm.
and our solutions to difficulties that come. Of course, it comes with Master. All of our gurus are that way. But for us at Ananda, it's kind of a special little, almost like a new link that we have to God, to God and gurus. Because I know Swami would always want us to not put so much focus on him, but to our gurus. That's just the way he was.
Yeah. And also the fact that Ananda has continued in a way, there have been changes also at Ananda, let's say the Ananda Sangha worldwide, it just continues to expand, right?
Yes, absolutely,
Mm.
and that's no surprise. I mean, it's a it can, it should, it must. I know it will.
Yeah, but
And
that bears out that it doesn't depend on his physical, him being physically present. After he left the body, Ananda still continues to grow, and that in itself may be a sign of his
right. And it was so
ongoing.
interesting that we had our 50th anniversary last year.
I was
And
there.
yes, I know you were. And dedicated our new temple, and there were people, literally thousands of people from all over the world who were there. We celebrated. It was astral. It was wonderful. And we couldn't have done that this year. Just think of the timing. We did it last year. It was done. The temple was open. We've used it. It's been a blessing. And then the doors closed. And they'll reopen, I know for sure. But it was just the timing on that was quite interesting. I thought about it often, how that all worked out.
Beautiful. So we've been talking about your more recent activities. Shall we go back in time now and
Whatever you
come with
prefer.
the classical question? Guess what? How did you come to Ananda? How did you meet Yogananda?
I
When?
I first read the autobiography of a yogi in 1969. I was living in Houston, Texas. I was living there because I'd gone to college in Texas. I'm originally from Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee. I told you that. And I was working for an airline. I just graduated from college and I was just sort of seeking in my own way. And one night I came home from work. I had worked a late shift at the airline, and my roommate was having a party, and there was a young man standing on his head in my living room over in the corner. He was standing on his head. And I went over and I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm doing yoga." And I said, "Oh, well, I didn't know anything about yoga. Tell me about it." So he came down off his head and told me a little bit about hatha yoga. And then he said, "By the way, you should read the autobiography of the yogi. You would really enjoy that." And so I said, "Okay." I just stored it away. And not long after that, I was in a bookstore and happened to see it. And that's really pretty amazing on the whole, because in 1969 in Houston, Texas, not much going on
That's the
spiritually.
Bible Belt, right? Where there are very
Very much so, yeah. And the
Orthodox
fact
Christians.
that I could find that book, it's sitting with its picture of Master, and I just wanted it instantly, and I wanted to read that book instantly. And so I did. And from that moment on, I always knew I was Master's disciple. I just didn't know what to do about it. Took me 3 years to figure out that he had some lessons that you could take, learn how to meditate. I was a little slow, but it was, well, that's neither here nor there. Anyway, I did start taking the lessons, and I think it was maybe 3 years later I heard about Ananda. Ananda was just getting started then, in 1970, 71, somewhere in there. And I thought, well, I was very interested in communities. I actually moved into a community in Texas before I moved here to Ananda. Not a spiritual community, it's more like a hippie commune. But I was very interested in community living, and of course, I knew I loved Master. And when I heard there was a community in Northern California where everybody who lived there was a disciple of Master, I said, wow, that sounds like a place I should go. And so it took me a little while, but I got it together and first came out here. I flew out from Houston to Sacramento, and let's see, the date, I always hold on to the date. It was July the 17th, 1975. It's my first time here. And it was an amazing moment for me. And I had no question from that point forward what my life was going to be like. But I still had to go back to Texas where I was living and wrap up things there. Before I could actually move here, it took me a while, but I literally physically moved here. I drove my 64 Chevrolet car out here all by myself, all the way across the country from Texas to Ananda in 1978, summer of 1978. Very interesting thing happened. I didn't plan it that way, but I arrived at Ananda on July the 17th, 1978, exactly 2 years to the day when I had first set foot on the property. That first summer, I spent 2 months here being in the apprentice program, working in the garden with Shivani and Kirtani, and we all were good buddies and still are over the miles. And then the next summer I came back and stayed maybe 3 weeks and went to Spiritual Renewal Week. I took Kriya from Swami that first summer I was here. That was my first Kriya initiation.
That first summer was 1975 or 6?
The what?
That first summer when you came, was that 1975?
And between the first summer, 1975, when I came, and the second summer when I came, the forest fire came. So I came to this beautiful forested, lovely green community. And the next summer I came, it was just a charred, burned down mess. And I was so impressed at the people, because to me, I would have thought they just have to give up and go somewhere else. This is a mess. Nothing is ever going to come out of this. How can it exist? And the houses are all burned down. The people were, living in tents or whatever they could live in. And but Swami was here, and Swami was, forget about it. Yes, we're going to rebuild. Everything's going to be great, and all of that. So so I stayed 3 weeks and worked in the garden. The gardens didn't burn, so I was able to help out there. And then by the next summer, I moved, and packed up and moved here. And there was no place to move into. I didn't have any place to live. So I went up to the meditation retreat and volunteered to pitched a tent and volunteered to cook in the kitchen there. So that was my first job here, was cooking, although I didn't get paid for a while. I did cook for a number of months, and then somebody who was in a salaried position left, and I was able to receive the giant salary of $55 a month.
That's a lot of money.
No, it was hard to live on it. It really was. And but we found a way. We all found a way. And I'm very grateful for those early years at Ananda when none of us had
Yeah.
really anything, a place to live, or, we just barely got by, but we got by with the grace of God. And Swami was here, and, everything was wonderful, really. It's just learning, a lot of learning experiences going on.
Somewhere in one of your early interviews, either with you or with Sudarshan, it came up that you were one of the first couples. You and he were one of the first couples in those early days. Is that right?
Not exactly, no. What it was the community was very strongly divided between the monastic order, the monks and nuns, and they all lived over with Swami at that area, the monastery, and they were the dominant force. They were all the leaders and the managers of businesses and everything. So they were the main people in the community. And then there were what they were called the householders. They were like second-class citizens. They were married or had children or whatever, but they didn't do much. I mean, they were not thought well of even. And so there were not very many like couples. Mostly it was maybe a man, a woman, and one child or a couple of child. It was just sort of a strange situation. But Sudarshan had gone to Swami and asked him if he could join the monastery, and Swami said, I don't think that's your path. And my situation was that I moved here with a first marriage that I had to dissolve. I was still married. I was going through a divorce. So we were in sort of odd situation when we met each other at the meditation retreat. I was cooking in the kitchen and he was the maintenance man. So the cook meets the maintenance man, and there's an attraction. But we weren't sure what that meant or what we should do. And of course, I had to go through a divorce and, all sorts of things. So no, we weren't the first couple in the community, but we were kind of an odd couple. And back in those days, if people, it was such a small town here. We used to laugh at it. You see a man and a woman talking to each other in the line at the market to pay for their groceries, then all of a sudden they're a couple, or they're not, or the rumors fly and all of that kind of thing. So yeah, we went ahead and got married, and it was an interesting ceremony we had because Swami had decided at that point that he didn't want to marry people anymore except in big groups. Did you ever hear about that?
No.
That was in 1980. Swami presented this plan to the community. He said, I'm tired of weddings. I'm a renunciate. I'm a monk. I don't like doing weddings. But I know that, most of you would like my blessing for a wedding. So we're not going to have weddings of two couples, a man and a woman anymore. We're going to have group weddings. So save up and have one a year. Mm-hmm. And so Darshan and I were in on that first group mm-hmm. wedding. 4 other couples that got married along with us. And we have to kind of sadly and almost jokingly say we're the only ones that are still married right now. The rest of them didn't make it. And so we are 40. We have our 40th year wedding anniversary this year in August 17th. That's 40 years we've been married. So
congratulations. That's beautiful.
Okay. We did okay. But we were exploring, well, now what does this mean to be married here? I didn't know, because Swami was very much putting his energy into the monastic order then, very much. And he didn't change that until he himself got married. And then things were really different, yeah. So
the way Asha explained that, I interviewed her as well before this issue. There was another interview. And she said that at a certain point at Ananda, all the monks were they were losing their, what do you call that? Like
their vocation.
Yeah, their authenticity. They were monks because they had put it on themselves to be a monk, but it was like a straitjacket that they were putting on. And and then all of a sudden Swami started this relationship, and then everything turned around and a lot of new energy came free. So
it was true. Yeah, very true. He said, this is a community primarily for householders. And all of a
But
sudden,
did he get to that later, or because I get the impression if I hear you say that he was giving all his attention to the monks, that
and
and the nuns, of course, and how does that compare with, on the other hand, Ananda wanting to be a householder community?
well, Divine Mother somehow took care of this, and I kind of laughingly say, when I look back on those years, all of a sudden the monks and nuns all married each other. Many of them did, actually. That not all, of course. I mean, there are some people now who are still monastics in the truest sense of the word from those days.
Mm-hmm.
um, there was a wave of energy that went through the community that was almost irresistible. I mean, I was already married and had been for a while when that happened, but I could feel it rolling over us. It's like, okay, there's a new energy here. And none of us knew exactly what it meant, but it was powerful.
Well, I want
And
to share something, and maybe you can explain it to me. So when I met Swami in 1985,
yeah,
and this was in Como in northern Italy, and he was then, Rosanna was there as well.
yes.
And so I got to meet her as well, and we connected. And then later, I was in Amsterdam. I'm from Holland originally, and I got a letter there was a letter was actually been sent to everybody, and it described that he and Rosanna went to visit this saint in southern Italy, and that Natuzza Evolo, she's very famous in Italy, by the way, and
Yes.
she passed away probably 20 years ago, maybe a bit less, but and so she said, why don't you get married? You can become saints together. And so he basically, in that letter, he announces his marriage. And I remember I was reading this letter I was sitting on a terrace, one of those terraces in Amsterdam where you can sit down and have a drink. And I was reading that, and I felt an enormous joy and bliss. And I started walking through the city, and I had no idea why. I mean, this was just, I don't know why I felt so happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you can say? And then later, so I wrote that to him, and then a month or two later, I got a little typewritten written letter saying, Jan, many people wrote to us and that they experienced the same level of inspiration that you felt. And to us, this was a corroboration that Divine Mother wanted us to take this step in our lives, and many good things have happened at Ananda as a result. So
It was a wonderful moment in time for Ananda, especially those of us who were householders. It was like all of a sudden our lives were validated, and also, I mean, of course, Rosanna was like an angel, and we all loved her very much. And Swami seemed happy, happy, happy. We were always happy when Swami was happy, and so yeah, it was a defining moment for the history of Ananda. There's so many things. I'm so glad I've been around for a long time because I can see all these things, all these currents of energy, and things rise, things fall, and yet life goes on, and the essence of our discipleship stays the same. And we're just putting one foot in front of the other as best we can.
Yeah, beautiful. So, and maybe this new monastic order is like a bridge between what in the beginning of years of Ananda may have seemed a little bit like a separation, and now you have Nayaswamis who can marry or are married, and Tyagis, and maybe that there's like as if it has come together now. Is that a right, good interpretation?
I was very happy because I really always wanted to be a monastic in a certain way, very much. And then, but I was, at the time I even heard the word, I knew there was such a possibility. I was already married, and then I divorced and I remarried, and so I thought, well, that's just not for me in this lifetime. Then all of a sudden, Swami comes up with this Nayaswami thing. I'm just going, oh, let me at it. I want to do that. And that's been a wonderful part of my life. I've been very, very happy to become a Nayaswami and to try to understand what that means and go deeper and, you know, and all of that. Right now, I'm also going through this thing of learning how to live in the fourth ashram, which means the last part of your life, according to the Indian system. On my birthday in this past January, the community, this is before we had to quit having anything in the way of group meetings, the community celebrated my birthday and my entry into the fourth ashram. That's the first time anybody had ever done that. I think they just came
When
up
is
with that.
is there a specific age when you get into the fourth ashram?
No, well, actually, when you read about it in what Swami and Master have said about the four ashrams of life, it's age 72 is ordinarily when you're supposed to go into that phase of your life where you become much more inward and much more you do a lot more meditation and so forth, that kind of thing. And of course in India it's much more structured than that. You don't even live anywhere, you never stay anywhere more than 3 nights. You're a traveling sannyasi, you know, it's much more extreme in certain ways. But anyway, it was my birthday, and for some reason they come up with the idea to have a kind of a combination birthday party and entry into the fourth ashram. I'll tell you something really funny. A friend of mine who lives over in Auburn, she somehow heard that there was going to be this party in celebration for Savitri on the 15th of January, her birthday and her entry into the fourth ashram or something like that. She hadn't been in contact with me for a while. She thought that meant I'd died. She thought I'd entered the fourth ashram or something. That meant I was.
Final stage.
Yeah, that was. I said no, not yet anyway. But
and
anyway.
She came to the party.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was a big party. I was amazed and thrilled, and I mean, it was not anything I ever expected, but it was fun.
Just one more thing about your book. We're not going to end talking about death, even though we started talking.
I have something to say about my books too, and I want to tell you how to get a hold of one if you want to buy one. Okay, yeah. Can I tell you that? Okay, so, well, Crystal Clarity published them.
Yeah.
www.crystalclarity, and also they're on Amazon, both in paperback form, Amazon.com, paperback form, and also ebooks. You know, that you read on your reader. Yeah. I don't know. I never read anything but a real book, but. Yeah.
Well, I would recommend them to everybody because it does help. I mean, this is like, it helps your meditation, it helps your spiritual life, and I stay still with a little bit of lingering fear of death. That moment, you know.
It's not good. It's going to be a real party. Oh gosh.
No, but that moment when you feel that you want to breathe and you can't breathe, that's difficult.
You know how the master says exactly how long that happened and that lasts. So he says that you go through a little bit of uneasiness of not being able to breathe. You feel a little bit like you're suffocating or something. He said that lasts, I haven't got my book here. It's like 5 seconds or 7 seconds or something like that. So I suggest you do the experiment of holding your breath. It's not very long. Yeah. You could easily hold your breath longer than that. It's no big deal at all.
So what is the best from all the meditation techniques that we have? We have energizing, we have Om, we have Hong So, and we have the 4 Kriya levels. Which one of those is, you think, the best preparation for death? For dying, not death.
I think quite possibly it might be the fourth Kriya, the highest Kriya initiation is what I feel. In one sense, and I know that there's a tradition that when Christ died on the cross, he did the head rotations that go with that Kriya initiation. And so there's that aspect. And then possibly also Hong Sa in the spine, because to get used to going into at least a small amount of breathlessness would prepare you very much for the moment when you actually do go breathless in death. Mm-hmm. But then I don't know, I couldn't get along without any of our techniques. They all
Yeah.
So in energization, I don't know, you know how to direct energy, and if you're about to leave this world, it'd be a good thing to know
Yeah.
where and how to direct your energy so you can go out through the spiritual eye instead of the medulla. That's where you want to leave from, if you can't leave from here. But you know, most of us are going to come and go through this point
Yeah.
until moksha, final liberation.
Yeah.
So it's hard to pick. It's hard to pick. But those probably Fourth Kriya and Hongsa would be.
Okay. So the fourth Kriya, because it puts all the energy up here, because it creates such a, okay.
A magnet. It creates a magnet in the upper chakras, and that's what you want to go out with as best you can. It's my understanding.
When it comes to pain, like people who have cancer, and in Holland, my country, in the Netherlands, there was a friend of mine, and he knew what pain was because he had a car accident at the age of 18 or 19, and from that moment he had to sit in a wheelchair, and he had, you know, the lower back, something like that. And when in Holland they were discussing about the euthanasia,
Yes.
he fought a very sincere battle against that law. And it was very interesting. But basically, euthanasia is meant to avoid people to the physical pain that can be there at the end of life, especially when you develop cancer. How would you relate to that? What would you comment on that when people at the end of their lives they develop cancer, and that makes it so difficult to, unless you've done many kriyas and many years of meditation, of course, it does prepare you somehow. But you know, it's still, is there anything you could say about that?
Well, once again, I devoted a whole chapter to the concept of euthanasia and whether it was a good thing or a bad thing in the book, the novel Through the Gates of Death. And I didn't want to leave that out because it's a big question in people's minds of the rightness or wrongness of that concept. And you can see why and the reason for that. But in that, of course, I told the story of Padre Pio and how a person asked him, who was suffering badly, I don't know if it's cancer, but a lot of pain and everything at the end of their life. And he said, Padre Pio, free me, let me go, help me die. This is too much. And his only answer was so poignant. He said, just a little more chaff to burn. Now, chaff, it means, you know, leftover from the wheat harvest. But what it means is a little more karma to burn. There's a little more left. If I were, he said, and Swami sort of interpreted that. What Padre Pio was saying is, if I could assist you to leave right now, but if I did, it would not help you. You need this time to deal with this karma. So my answer to someone who asked me about that is that there are many ways in the paths of yoga to learn how to deal with pain. And I know that firsthand because I have dealt with pain. Last year I had a major heart episode, and I had to learn, because they couldn't give me pain medication for quite a while. And I had to learn how to face it, how to overcome it, or be with it, or go into it, or all the things that Swami used to talk to us about how he dealt with pain. I mean, he dealt with a lot of pain in his life. I know he was dealing on different levels, but I, in my regular human level, I had to figure out how am I going to face this? How am I going to deal with it? And so I think it's a better solution not to think in terms of, well, let me just die and get out of this mess and this pain. But you can be greatly strengthened by saying, how can I deal with it in the highest possible way? And so that's my thought on that.
Yeah. Well, let's end with something, for example, that regards more the whole of Ananda. So what do you think is the secret of Ananda's success in the world?
Paramahansa Yogananda and his teachings, and Swami's willingness to take those teachings and make them real by giving life in a community, or if you can't live in an Ananda community, to take help and refuge from people who do, It's so interesting right now that people can't meet together physically as much anymore. So they're having to meet online, and it's almost like a higher age in a certain way. And yes, I like everyone hunger for personal contact with people that I don't have as much anymore. Even here, living in Ananda Village, all of a sudden I'm more in isolation, and I miss that satsang, that being with other devotees that I'm so used to having had. But I think it's giving us a little taste of how to relate spiritually with other people in a new way. And it's just like it's being forced on us. We have to learn how to do that in a new way. I think it's an amazing thing. And if and when this is ever over, I think we're going to look back and say that was a really good thing. It didn't seem like it at the time, but it really gave birth to new ways of being with other disciples and deepening our own spiritual practices in our path. And does that answer your question okay?
It does. It does. What would you say to people who do not live, maybe it's not their karma to live in an Ananda community? Anything that you could say to encourage them to, in their efforts, maybe to start meditation groups or guide meditation groups?
Well, the very first thing I would say always would be to join the Ananda virtual community. You know, we have an online virtual community that are together as much as they can be, just like you and I are. We're thousands of miles from each other, and yet we're having satsang, we're having a time together. So the Ananda virtual community would be my very first thing I would tell people to do. I mean, after I came to Ananda the first time, I had to go back and live in Texas for 3 years. And that was exactly my question. How do I hang on to this? What can I do? I'm all alone out here and no other devotees are around me. And there wasn't even such thing as a computer back then. So what can I do? And so I had met people here. So I asked people if they would write letters of encouragement to me, and they did. God bless them. Kirtani, Shivani, Prakash, so many wrote me and encouraged me, and it was so meaningful to me. So encouragement and finding someone who can inspire you, even on a phone call or a letter or email or whatever, doing your best, and then finding some kind of way to serve, to help people. What I did is, because I had been at Ananda for 2 months, I went back to to Texas. I lived out in rural Texas and nobody had ever heard of yoga. I volunteered to start teaching yoga classes. I had no training. All I'd ever done is gone to sadhana here at the Expanding Light, you know. But I thought, well, they don't know any more than I do, and so what could be the harm of it? And I started giving classes and meeting very, very nice people who were sincere seekers. I mean, they weren't necessarily on my path, but after I started giving Hatha yoga classes, I realized there were a few who really wanted to learn to meditate. Well, here I am. I don't know. I've never been given meditation teacher training. It hadn't even been formed. It took a long time. I started the first meditation teacher training program formally at Ananda many years later, but I did my best. I had a little meditation group. I think I had, at maximum I ever had was 3 people in it. But that was my way of staying in contact, was giving as I could, serving as I could, staying in contact with Ananda people as best as I could. And it's almost as though that propelled my life. I didn't think I could ever move to Ananda Village. I didn't think it would be possible, or because there was no other place. There was no other Ananda. Of course, now things are different. But at that time, I thought, wow, I'm just stuck out here in spiritual wasteland. I got to do something. So I just kind of made it up. But I think I did the right things. I really do. I think God and Guru guided me to give, to serve, to love, to just right where, you know, I used to pray that prayer Master said, where thou hast placed me, there thou must come.
Yeah.
And I would say that over and over about, you put me here, now you come to me and help me to know how to be a disciple, a devotee in the best way I possibly can.
I think that's a wonderful way to end this interview. Thank you so much. This was real satsang for me. Thank you.